Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the Civil Service Examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Delhi edition dated 18th May 2022. The topics to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. Dear students, there is an important announcement for all of you. Today, just like every year, we are releasing the compilation of DNS quiz for the section of Economic and Social Development for the upcoming Prelims examination. You can find the link in the YouTube description box below. The questions are part of DNS quiz and have been compiled from January 2021 till April 2022. Compilations for other sections will be released shortly. So now let us move towards our first topic. This topic is in relation to the Indo-Pacific region and has appeared in today's The Hindu Delhi edition at page number 10. Now, though this Indo-Pacific region in the recent global geopolitics has become very important, but the latest context in which this article has appeared is that recently our Honorable Defense Minister Mr. Rajnath Singh has said that Indo-Pacific region is important for the economy of the whole world, and India being a responsible maritime stakeholder in the region, it is the primary objective of our Navy to keep the Indo-Pacific open, safe and secure. In this very context, it becomes very important for us to understand the global geopolitics associated with the Indo-Pacific region. From the UPSC scheme of syllabus perspective, this topic appears in General Studies paper 2 in the main section of International Relations and the subsections of India and its neighborhood relations, as well as bilateral, regional and global groupings which affect the Indian interests. In today's detailed session, we are going to learn about the Indo-Pacific region, importance or significance associated with it, concerns or issues, and the way ahead. In the way ahead, we will learn about the existing initiatives as well as the new initiatives which should be taken by India in order to achieve its national interests. So now let us begin our discussion. First of all, we should understand that what is Indo-Pacific region. Now this is the Indo-Pacific region which consists of Indian Ocean as well as Western Pacific Ocean. Now here it is very important to understand that Indo-Pacific region does not have any concrete boundaries and therefore every country defines this particular region which suits its own national interests in a best way. For example, few years back this region was known as Asia Pacific, and this Asia Pacific region excluded India because at that point of time it was not believed that India is a major dominant player in this particular region. From the USA's perspective, this region is defined as the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean up to the western coast of India. And from India's perspective, this region is defined from the eastern coast of Africa, that is the complete Indian Ocean, and the western part of the Pacific Ocean, which is shown here in front of you. So for us, the definition from the India's perspective holds significance. So now let us discuss the importance or significance of the Indo-Pacific region. This importance is from the global perspective as well as from the India's perspective. So the first important thing in this regard is the strategic location of this Indo-Pacific region. Because of its strategic location, this region in nowadays has become very significant for the global geopolitical analysis. First of all, you need to understand the location of Indo-Pacific region is such that it is bordered by some of the fastest growing countries across the world. It has China, it has India, it has Asian economies as well as the African region. Then comes the trade part. Now, Indo-Pacific region is one of the most dominant region as far as the oil trade is concerned. The flow of goods, services, as well as people across this region is so immense that it holds a very high economic significance because of its location in the global geopolitics. In this very line comes the second important dimension, that is the economic significance. The market potential of this region is very huge because we know that if it is having countries like India, China as well as Asian and African countries, which has the highest population base across the world. So you can very well understand the market potential of this very region. This region has a very high demand of various goods and services, and that is why any country which aims to become a superpower in near future cannot ignore this region. This region is bordered by tiger economies, that is the countries of Southeast Asia, and they are one of the fastest growing economies as far as the manufacturing industries and service industries are concerned. Further, in India, China, as well as Africa, we have huge manufacturing bases. And in this very line, we also have a huge resource base. The resources can be in a form of like natural resources like iron, copper, lithium, coal, etc. Or there are other type of resources also. For example, the fisheries or agriculture. So because of these very reasons, the economic potential of this region is also very huge. The third dimension comes from the geopolitical angle. Now, in this very region, we know that rising China is very significant. In recent decades, the rise of China has been witnessed by all world, whether it is in terms of economy or it is in terms of diplomacy or it is in terms of military. The rising China has changed the global geopolitics in such a manner that the global attention has shifted towards this particular Indo-Pacific region. Further, this region also encompasses the major groupings of the world. For example, here we have BIMSTEC, RCEP, the recently formed Quad and AUKUS, SAARC, IORA, etc. And the third and the latest point in this perspective is the Russian Ukraine conflict. Now, there is a reason for it. If you closely understand the global geopolitics and especially the Eurasian geopolitics, you will understand that because of the Russian Ukraine conflict, the Russia's attention is completely shifted towards the Ukraine. In this very line, the Western countries like Europe as well as USA, their attention has also shifted towards this particular conflict and their focus towards Indo-Pacific has reduced. In the backdrop of this change attention scenario, the China is not facing any hindrance from these superpowers in this Indo-Pacific region, and that is why China in recent times has become fairly aggressive in this region. And because of this very conflict, this Indo-Pacific region is facing a higher dominance of China. Then comes the fourth dimension, that is the security aspect. Now, the Indian Ocean is very much known for maritime piracy. For example, near the areas of Suez Canal, we have Somali pirates. Then there is a lot of human trafficking, drugs peddling, as well as arms smuggling. Therefore, it is said that Indian Ocean is becoming the backyard of the organized crime. Next comes the fifth dimension, that is the cultural angle. Now, the historical ties of all the countries which border this particular Indo-Pacific region is very important. We have Islamic ties, we have Buddhist ties, as well as Hinduism ties. For example, the Islam which spreaded from the West Asian region which borders the Indian Ocean spreaded in India also. Similarly, Buddhism and Hinduism spreaded from India towards other parts of the world. For example, the Buddhism spread from India in countries like Sri Lanka, China, as well as Southeast Asian countries. Similarly, Hinduism also spreaded in countries like Indonesia, Mauritius, etc. So, because we are tied with a common historical lineage, that is why there is a huge importance of cultural linkages among the population which border this particular region. And the last aspect comes from the ecological perspective. Now, because the Indo-Pacific region which we are talking about lies mainly in the tropical areas, and tropical areas are known to have a very rich biodiversity on one hand, but on the other hand, this particular region is also known for the high level of threat indicators which the biodiversity faces. Further, this region is also known for disasters like tsunami, floods, droughts, cyclones, etc. And next important angle is the monsoon. Now, South Asian region is known for the monsoonal climate, and the monsoonal climate has its origin in this particular region. The atmospheric as well as the oceanic interactions generate the monsoonal climate of this region. And if we have to understand the economy of South Asian region, we must understand the monsoonal patterns. Because of all these angles, the Indo-Pacific region in today's time holds a very huge importance and significance. But despite this fact, there are a lot of issues and concerns associated with this region, and now we will understand those issues and concerns. Now, first and the foremost issue which this region faces is the rise of China, the dominant China. For example, in the South China Sea, we all are aware about the unilateral attempts which are made by China in order to gain larger territories. Similarly, the Chinese aggression on the line of actual control along the borders with India has also aggressively grown. The China's relation with the other countries, let's say Vietnam, is also not in very good terms. So that is why the dominant rise of China has created a instability in this particular region. And in order to counter China, this instability has further increased because of the entry of big players like USA. The second important concern is the India's economic and military strength is not at par with China. The reason for saying this is that our GDP is far below China. Our manufacturing bases still do not compete with China. The potential of special economic zones are also lower as compared to China. Further, as far as the military ammunitions are concerned, we have lesser number of arms and ammunitions. India's domestic economy is facing a challenge because of the post-COVID turmoil. After the death of the Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, for last 5 to 6 months, the post of Chief of Defence Staff is lying vacant. And India is reconsidering its military reforms. But till those military reforms, there is a huge gap. In this backdrop, it is said that the economic and military strength of India still is not that much that it can unilaterally dominate the entire Indo-Pacific region. The third important concern is there are different interests of different countries. Now, despite the fact that on certain issues US and India are converging, but there are several other issues where we have divergent interests. For example, to counter the China in Indo-Pacific, US and India converge. But when it comes to deal with the Russia, there are divergent interests between US and India. Similarly, there is also an issue between US and Russia in this particular region, and Russia, despite the fact that it lies above this particular region, but it is still a dominant player because Russia has good relations with China on one hand and India on the other hand. Similarly, there is a direct conflict of hegemony between US as well as China. Then we also have countries like Japan and Australia. So what is happening is that this Indo-Pacific region has recently become a global geopolitical hotspot in which every country is checking its own luck and power. And because of these competing interests, we come to the fourth, last but not the least issue. That is, there are a lot of issues which many a times becomes conflictory in nature, and that is why it becomes very difficult to have a balance of power in this particular region. Because this is such a region that we have big countries like US, China and India. Then we have very smaller countries like Laos, Cambodia and Vietnam. Then there is a huge divide between developed and developing. For example, India is a developing country. US is a developed country which is still a major player in this particular region. Australia and Japan are developed countries. Southeast Asian region, it also in itself has some developed and some developing countries. So the point is that because this region has several countries which are going through different socio-economic status, that is why there are multiple conflicting issues which are not allowing the balance of power to be established in this region. So now let us move towards the way ahead. Now, way ahead should be learned in two ways. That is, first is that we must also focus on the existing initiatives, and then we should also focus on the new initiatives which should be taken. As far as the existing initiatives is concerned, we have Quad. That is the quadrilateral security dialogue between four countries: US, Australia, Japan, and India. Now, this Quad was primarily built to establish free and secure Indo-Pacific region and to prohibit any unilateral attempt to change the level of peace in this particular region. That is why India must focus on these Quad groupings in order to ensure balance of power in this particular region. Then comes the initiatives of India. For example, Indian Ocean Rim Association as well as Sagar Initiative, that is security and growth for all in this region. Now, by focusing on these initiatives, India can try to attempt to have a peaceful, secured, and free areas in the Indian Ocean region and prohibit any power struggle in this particular region. Indian Ocean should be strengthened as a zone of peace rather than the zone of conflict. Further, we also have several regional groupings with which India has very good relationships. For example, BIMSTEC as well as ASEAN. India must leverage the potential of BIMSTEC and ASEAN, and that too more in the backdrop when other regional groupings like SAARC is not yielding the desired results. Then, in order to take all the regions in the eastern side of India together, India must also focus on its Act East policy. These are those measures which can build harmony between different countries despite the fact that they might have certain conflicting interests. In line with this, India must also focus on new areas. First, India must leverage Russia in order to have better diplomatic relations with China. Russia is the only country in this region which has friendly relations with both, that is, India and China. Second, India must try to strengthen multilateralism across the world in the backdrop of growing regionalism these times. Because if the organizations like United Nations are strengthened, it is believed that the rule-based global order can be established and strengthened. And next becomes the India's focus towards its maritime capabilities. The maritime domain awareness must be strengthened in order to build the naval capabilities. Because Indo-Pacific region is an oceanic region, and to control this region, the realistic policies convince us that any country which has to control this particular region must have strong naval presence in this area. So these are the certain steps which India can take in order to build a peaceful Indo-Pacific region which holds high promise for the growth of all the countries of this particular region. Now this was a lengthy topic, so we'll revise this topic in brief once again. First, we looked at the importance and significance of the Indo-Pacific region in terms of its location, economic potential, geopolitical potential, security aspect, cultural ties among the population, as well as the ecological significance of this particular region. Under this discussion, we looked at how multidimensionally this particular region is important, and therefore recently there has been a geopolitical shift towards this particular region. In line with this, we then discussed certain concerns and issues associated with this region. We discussed that how unilateral Chinese dominance in this region is challenging the stability of this particular area. Then we also looked that India still does not have enough economic and military capability to unilaterally command this entire region. And in the last, we also discussed the multiple different and conflictory issues with which different countries like Japan, Australia, India, US, and China have in this particular region. And in the last, we discussed the way ahead in two terms, that is, the existing initiatives in terms of various groupings and the new initiatives which India can take in terms of diplomacy as well as military strength. This topic has appeared at page number 14. This topic is in relation to the recently inaugurated 5G test bed. This is the very context of this news article. The context says that our Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi inaugurated the country's first 5G test bed that will enable the startups and industry players to test their products locally, thereby reducing the dependence on facilities outside the country. Now, from the examination's perspective, you need to be aware about what exactly do you mean by 5G. Going by the previous year question paper analysis, UPSC in 2019 preliminary examination asked this particular question. The question read that, with reference to the communication technologies, what is or are the difference between the LTE, that is long-term evolution, and VoLTE, that is voice over long-term evolution technology? There were two statements given. Statement 1, LTE is commonly marketed as 3G and VoLTE is commonly marketed as advanced 3G. Statement 2, LTE is data only technology and VoLTE is a voice only technology. You had to find the correct answer out of the given four options. Now, to attempt this question correctly, first you need to understand that what exactly do you mean by LTE and VoLTE technology. And this is the basic crux of our today's discussion. In today's session, we are going to learn about the technical aspects of the 5G technology as well as the analytical aspects of this particular technology. So now let us move ahead. Now, as we all know that 5G is a next generation cellular technology that will provide faster and more reliable communication with ultra low latency. Now, what exactly is latency? We'll know about this later. Now, the basic idea of this technology is that it will be faster as well as reliable. The expected speed of this technology will range from 2 to 20 gigabytes per second, that is Gbps. And as we all of know that presently we are going through the fourth phase of industrial revolution. This technology is going to be very significant in providing the base to this particular industrial revolution. The data transfer speeds will be increased to a huge amount. Almost it is expected that it will be 100 times more than the present speed. In this regard, now let us trace the evolution of the 5G technology. The first generation technology was the analog technology that supported only the voice communications, and the speed of this technology was very low compared to present. Its speed was just around 2.4 kbps. You need to remember that it was only the voice based technology, voice communications. Then came the second generation technologies, whereby the technology became digital rather than analog. And along with the voice, we were able to send SMS, picture messages, and MMS. The speed of this particular technology was 64 kbps. So here we have voice. Here we have voice plus some data which is like pictures. Then came the third generation technology that was based on more data and video calling. Mobile internet access speed reached up to 2 Mbps. So here we have video calling. Then came the 4G technology with higher speed, low cost voice and data services. Then came the 4G LTE, that is long term evolution. Now, because of this particular technology, we were able to see high resolution videos without buffering, and the speed of this particular technology reached up to 100 Mbps to 1 Gbps. And in this very line, we also had VoLTE, that is VoLTE technology, that is voice over long term evolution. You can simultaneously operate your internet on your mobile phones while talking to someone on your phones. And now we have reached to the fifth generation technology, which has ultra low latency, high connection density, stable network, wide frequency spectrum, and no network congestion. The speed is expected around to be 20 Gbps. In this very line, now let us understand what exactly do you mean by latency. In common man's language, latency refers to a time period. It is the time which data takes to travel between its source and destination. And obviously, If we have high latency period, that will mean that the time taken to travel by the data is higher. And if we have low latency period, the time taken to travel the data is lower. That is why fifth generation technology have ultra low latency. Now, going by the expected benefits of this technology, the most important benefit of this technology is going to be in the field of artificial intelligence. It will provide totally new dimensions to the connected and autonomous systems. Further, it can also be used to transform the existing cities into the smart and innovative cities. We know that government had come up with the smart city mission, whereby data-driven governance will be the key feature of all these cities. And to implement the data-driven governance, we must have high speed density networks. And here is where the 5G will find its important role. In this line, it also has a great potential for India to move to an advanced digital revolution. As we have already discussed that it is going to be the base of the fourth phase of industrial revolution, and emerging technologies like Internet of Things, machine learning and communications. Hence it is expected that it will give India a leapfrog jump in the fields of communication development. Further, it has much larger range of applications and services including driverless vehicles, telesurgery, real-time data analytics, etc. One of the primary applications of the 5G will be the implementation of the sensor embedded network that will allow the real-time relay of information across the fields such as manufacturing, consumer durables, and agriculture. Now let us look at what are the various issues in India, and are we really ready to launch ourselves into the domain of 5G technology? To answer this particular question, we need to understand the present socio-economic as well as technological situation of our country. Now, the first point in this regard is that countries of Asia, except China, including India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, are very late in adopting the 5G technology, and we have lost the early move advantage. The second issue is related to the reserve prices. These reserve prices are very high and are set by the governments, which in turn will hinder the prospects of private investment. These high prices for the spectrum auctions amid ongoing fiscal deficits will drag the development and expansion of technology in backward direction. The next issue is of digital divide. We all know that there is a huge digital divide in our country. The rural population, tribal population, backward communities are lagging far behind compared to their counterparts in urban areas. The mobile penetration density has though increased, but still the internet availability, digital literacy of these sections are very poor. And in this backdrop, if we are going to launch 5G technology, it is expected that it will further increase the existing digital divide in our country. The next technical issue is of inadequate availability of spectrum. The frequency of the spectrum which is required for the streamlined adoption of the 5G technology is still not there in our country. So that is why this inadequate availability of spectrum is going to be one of the biggest technical challenge in our country. Similarly, another technical issue is the low status of fiberization in India. The fiber optical networks are still not there in every corner of our country, and we all know that 5G technology is very much dependent on this fiberization. Further, consumers are still grappling with the basic network issues. We all face these issues in our daily life, like call drops and interrupted data services. There are still areas where 4G networks have not been stabilized, causing frequent disruptions in internet services. So, in this backdrop, it becomes unrealistic to think about 5G platforms to have a streamlined adoption across the country. And further, it is also expected that this technology is going to create liability on the end consumers themselves. Because from transition from 4G to 5G technology, one has to upgrade to the latest cellular technology. And for this, they have to spend some money. So these are the issues which still require a solution so that there can be a streamlined adoption of this particular technology across our country. In this very regard, we need to be aware about the way ahead for this. According to experts, the first suggestion for the government is that they should identify the end users and the population to be covered, they must analyze the existing network, their strengths and weaknesses, and further, the 5G rollout must be on the spatial basis. They must identify those particular cities where they are first going to roll out this particular technology. In line with this, they also must come up with a productive investment model in order to make this technology financially viable. Then they must adopt the PPP mode, that is public private partnership mode, to stimulate the fiber investment. The next big reform as suggested is that there should be 100% foreign direct investment in the telecom sector under the automatic route. And last but not the least suggestion is to strengthen the domestic telecommunication manufacturing market. Now, presently, because of various policies, for example, inverted duty structures, we still are not able to tap the potential of our domestic manufacturing capabilities. Still, we are very much dependent on the imports of this telecom technology. So, this situation must be reversed in order to have a sustainable and streamlined adoption of 5G technology in our country. This topic has appeared on page number 10 and is in relation to the G7. The context of this article is the India's step to ban the wheat export, and in this very regard, G7 is likely to increase the pressure to reverse the wheat export ban, and India is to participate in the high-level meeting on the food security. However, in today's session, we are going to discuss G7 as an organization. Because in the upcoming UPSC Prelims examination, there can be a question based on the G7 membership. For example, in UPSC 2016, the question was asked with regard to the Gulf Cooperation Council. The question asked you to find out which among these given options was not a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council. In this very regard, this also gives us a clue that you need to know the members of important organization. So therefore, we will look at the factual details regarding the G7. So G7 is basically an informal group of 7 countries, that is Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom and United States. The heads of all these countries hold annual summit with the European Union and other invitees. Together, the member countries represent 40% of the global GDP and 10% of the world's population. And because of this very fact that they represent 40% of the global GDP, this G7 grouping has a major say in shaping the global geopolitics. However, an important fact is that G7 has no legal existence. It does not have permanent secretariat or the official members. The presidency of the G7 meetings is held by each of the 7 countries in turn each year. Now there is also one important term in the newspapers, that is G8. The G8 is the grouping which consists of G7 plus Russia. Now because Russia was suspended from the G8 membership and therefore it becomes the G7 grouping. But in these days there has been a focus towards changing nature of the G7 countries and to include 3 more countries in this grouping, that is India, Australia and South Korea. And the new terminology which will be given to this new group is the D10, because there are 10 countries, that is 7 of G7 and 3 invitees as we have discussed, and all these countries are democracies. That is why D10 coalition of democracies. This was first proposed by Boris Johnson, and the original purpose of the D10 was aimed to address China's growing technological clout in 5G, as well as supply chain vulnerabilities which were exposed during the pandemic. So I hope these factual details are clear to you regarding the G7. This was a very brief topic from the prelims examinations perspective. In the last, we are going to discuss this important term. This term is from the economy section and has appeared in today's The Hindu Daily edition at text and context page. Sometimes such terms are very important, which forms the part of our basic syllabus. For example, in UPSC 2011, the question was asked in this very sense. The question was very basic in nature, which said that economic growth is usually coupled with, there were 4 options given: deflation, inflation, stagflation, or hyperinflation. In this very sense, you must be aware about all these key terms which are very basic in nature. In today's session, we are going to discuss the concept of stagflation. But in order to understand the concept of stagflation, first we need to understand the Phillips curve. Now, Phillips curve is related to the rate of inflation and unemployment. According to this curve, the inflation lies on the y-axis and the unemployment rate is on the x-axis. Now here I want to stress on this particular word. Many a times in question, the language is written in such a way that you get confused between that Phillips curve or dealing with employment rate or unemployment rate. So be very careful while reading the language of the questions. Now this curve says that there is an inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. The logic is very simple. Now what is inflation? Inflation is the general rise in prices. And why the prices of goods and services rise? There can be two factors. One is that either the cost of production increases or there is a demand which is greater than supply. So understand this. When we are having a very high level of unemployment, that means the people are not employed. That means no wages. If there are no wages, that means there is no demand. And if there is no demand, that means there is no inflation. Hence, if there is high unemployment, there is no inflation or there is low inflation. On the other hand, if there is low unemployment, that is, more people are employed, it means that higher wages, that means higher demand, which means higher inflation. So again, higher inflation and lower unemployment rates. So this is what basically this curve shows, that there is an inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. But now comes stagflation. Stagflation is a situation where inflation is also higher and unemployment is also higher. Therefore, it is said that stagflation defies the Phillips curves. It is a situation whereby we have a stagnant economic growth of a country. That means the country is not growing, the GDP of a country is not increasing. We are having a stagnant output of a country. Still, we are having high unemployment rates. So this is what basically we mean by the situation of stagflation. So I hope that this term is clear to you. There are various theories which are put in order to define that why there is stagflation. For example, according to one theory, when there are increased prices of oil, which means that there is a cost push inflation because the cost of production will increase. So hence we have an inflation scenario. In order to cope up with the profit margins, the industrialists lay off their workers and therefore the unemployment rate also increases. And hence we have higher cost of production, that means higher inflation and higher rate of unemployment. However, there are other theories also, but for us, we just need to understand that what do we mean by stagflation and the Phillips curve. So now is the time for the question of the day. The question from yesterday's DNS is in relation to the repo rate. The question asked you to find the incorrect statement out of the given two statements. Statement 1 was, the repo rate is always used by the RBI to inject short-term liquidity into the economy. This statement is incorrect. The statement 2 says, the repo rate is usually reduced to counter economic slowdown. This statement is correct. But because you have to find the incorrect statement, hence option A, that is 1 only, is the correct answer. The question from today's DNS is in relation to the G7 grouping. Which amongst the following is not the member of G7 grouping? A. USA, B. UK, C. India, D. Italy. So that's all for today. All the very best. Study hard.